Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my review of Cormac McCarthy's companion piece, The Passenger, which is Stella Morris. I was gifted this by my son. Thank you, son, for giving me this book so I can make this review. And I want to go ahead and do the review now. If you've seen my reviews of The Passenger, know that I didn't think very highly of that book. I didn't think that book was particularly good, and unfortunately I have to tell you that I think in lots of ways Stella Morris is worse. Now, I know that there are a lot of people out there who really like this book. And I'm not trying to tell you you're wrong to really like the book. My issues with the book have a lot to do with what I just think are just an overindulgence by McCarthy in his own ideas and what he wants to talk about, his willingness to ignore kind of the idea, the narrative imperative here, and there are other issues that I have, like for instance, why is it 2 books and why didn't they just edit it down to 1 book? And I think we all know the answer to that. So real quickly, if you weren't aware, the plot of Stella Morris is very heavily dependent on your knowledge of what took place in the pasture, because essentially what we have in the plot is that Alicia Western, Bobby Western's sister, Bobby Western's the protagonist of The Pasture, checks her into Stella Morris, which is a mental health institution, and all we get then in Stella Morris is a series of sessions between her and a psychiatrist named Dr. Cohen, in which they talk about her mental illness, they talk about her relationship with her brother Bobby, and she talks a lot about science and math and philosophy, music, etc. Really kind of fills these conversations, and that's it. There is no other plot. There is no action other than that. So you might then suspect that this is a heavily kind of character-driven story, and I suppose it is, but I don't know there's anything in this book that we learn about Alicia, the person, that we didn't already know about her. Alicia Western is a brilliant, very young woman who, maybe is in her late teens, 20s. At the time the book takes place, I'm not exactly sure. I forgot to look it up. At the time when she checks herself into Stella Morris, and she is a brilliant mathematician. She was accepted to the University of Chicago at 14, entered their doctoral program a couple of years later, spent her time working on math, thinking about physics. And so what we get then here is the doctor essentially asking her questions about her brother, about physics, about math, about philosophy, about her parents and her father's involvement in creation of the atomic bomb, about music, about the violin she plays. And the problem with that is, from my point of view, is we already knew all those things. We already knew Alicia did all those things. We knew that from The Passenger. As a matter of fact, we know what's going to happen to Alicia in the end. She's going to commit suicide, and we know she's going to commit suicide because at the beginning of The Passenger is a scene in which someone finds her body. So there is no real kind of plot development here. This is just all about, McCarthy telling us about, I suppose, Alicia. But to be honest with you, it really feels like Alicia, to me, is just a stand-in for McCarthy so that he can share with us all the cool stuff he's learned since he's been at the Santa Fe Institute about physics and math and all the things he's thought about, music and other things. And so for me, in lots of ways, these books, The Passenger and Stella Morris, represent an unfortunate detour, a detour from which I think McCarthy is unlikely to, get back on the main route from McCarthy's previous works. Now, one thing that is different about Stella Morris is that for the very first time in any McCarthy novel, as far as I know, we have a female protagonist. Our main character is a woman. And, that is something new. And I suppose, perhaps it's possible McCarthy listened to his critics in which, accused him of kind of low-grade misogyny and ignoring women and not being able to hurt women. He's decided he's going to do that here with Alicia. But the problem is that he has created a character who is impossible. She is brilliant and she is beautiful. Everyone comments on how physically attractive she is, and that's been an ongoing theme. So McCarthy's first woman protagonist novel, that character is the smartest person imaginable. She's the most beautiful person imaginable. She is virginal and that she never has sex. And yet she is also dirty-minded because the person she wants to have sex with and is in love with is her brother. That doesn't seem like, essentially she is a version of, the Madonna and the whore type stereotype, only in addition to being virginal, she's also like Einstein Madonna prostitute. It just feels like a really bad attempt at creating a female character. The only other character in the novel is Dr. Cohen, who is the person who interviews her, and Dr. Cohen is far from a benign presence. We learned that Dr. Cohen had been divorced from his wife. They got divorced because he was cheating on her. It's possible that he was cheating on her with his patient, so he's violated ethics. Then they get remarried again, and he says he stopped cheating, and yet during the conversations and the sessions with Alicia, he's clearly obsessed with her. He talks about how attractive she is. He accuses her of flirting with him. He is definitely ethically compromised, and so I think essentially he is just going back to the same pattern over and over again. And I think to a certain extent, we see all the characters going back to the same patterns over and over again. Alicia going back to math and to physics and so on and back and around, and Dr. Cohen doing the same thing. Dr. Cohen, I think, essentially acts as a stand-in for us, that we are Dr. Cohen, and Alicia in some ways is supposed to be Cormac McCarthy, which probably says quite a bit about his ego, and I think, produces a relatively, at times, tedious dialogue between the two. So a lot of people have tried to decide, what the passage's about, what's the big idea, what's the theme, etc. To me, the theme is nihilism. Essentially, we see Alicia here over and over again telling Dr. Cohen that nothing matters, that math doesn't have the answers, that human beings can't understand math, that physics doesn't have the answers, philosophy doesn't have the answers, religion doesn't have the answers, music doesn't provide the answers, and most importantly, that to Alicia, love doesn't provide the answers, and therefore there's no answers, there's no purpose, there's no point. And so naturally, we have Alicia committing suicide because she has come to the conclusion, that there's nothing to see. And, if Alicia is this smart, perfect human being, and she can't find anything to live for, and she can't find anything that's meaningful, then, what are the rest of us doing? And I find it a little irritating for an old man, a man older than me, to tell me that there is no meaning, to tell me that there is no purpose, to tell me that there is nothing of any permanence that matters. That's boring, and it's been done. So then about the writing, one of the things I always defend McCarthy about, because I have been in the past McCarthy fan, is his ability to describe the natural world and people within it. He has beautiful descriptions of the natural world in The Road and in Blood Meridian and in All the Pretty Horses. Books are full of that. Stella, and there are even examples of that in The Passenger. Stella Maris has none, because essentially we have two characters who we assume are locked in some kind of exam room with a tape recorder having a conversation, sitting across a table or something from one another, and that's it. So the thing that I think McCarthy is best at, we don't get any of that, and instead what we get here is a novel that's just purely dialogue. It's just purely one character talking to another. And at times that works really well. At times there's this kind of ping-ponging back and forth, and it's interesting, and the dialogue is sharp, but far, far, far too often, as was true in The Pastor, we see McCarthy just allowing Alicia to speak for paragraphs and to drop the names of every physicist, mathematician, whoever she can think of, and to reference all their theories, and to from that expound theories of her own. And Dr. Cohen does little more than say, "Oh, go on," or "Ooh, I don't understand." And when he says, "I don't understand," Alicia goes, "I know," and then she goes on to something else. And it's just it just, you have to be interested in what she's talking about for that to matter. To maintain your interest in that. And I know a lot of her readers are, and for some of those things I was interested too, but at some point it just becomes, it just feels a lot like McCarthy just spewing out what he's learned, what he thinks is cool, what he believes about science, math, and all those other things. And it's just too much to a certain extent. So the only other thing that really is kind of driving the plot here, other than hearing Alicia talk about all the things that she knows and all the physicists, whatever she's aware of, and math that she understands, is the doctor insisting on getting to the what he believes, and rightly I think, is her real problem, and that is her relationship with her brother. And if you know anything about this novel, you know that she has incestuous feelings. She is in love with her brother, not just in love with him, but also lust after him. And we know from The Passenger that Bobby Western feels the same way about his sister. And there's nothing about this that's not, I think, intentionally meant to introduce the creep factor. And if Alicia is this, all-knowing person, a person who's looked into the math and all the beauty of math and music and physics, and she can't find anything, and so the only thing she has left to live for is love, and that love is love for her brother, who refuses to go through with the mechanics of that lustful sexual relationship, then she has nothing to live for. Then to a certain extent, I think McCarthy wants us to see her as the enlightened person, as the person who knows what's going on. If he didn't want that to be true, he would have presented her with somebody who presented their own ideas, somebody who had their own strong beliefs, a counterweight to Alicia's ideas, and Dr. Cohen doesn't do that. So we're left then with Alicia saying, that it's not her fault that she was in love with her brother. It's not her fault that he's the only person who was right for her. It's not her fault. It's not Bobby's fault that she's the only person that's right for him. And she is stunned when he refuses to go along with the idea that they run off and pretend to be married and have kids. Now you might be thinking, well, Alicia suffers from mental illness. She certainly does. But, McCarthy makes her argument here pretty strong. And the part of this that bothers me is not, I think, McCarthy leading us to the point where we go, well, maybe Alicia's right, love being what it is, and we kind of see her argument because we've been led to believe that Alicia knows all this stuff. It's the fact that nowhere in that creep factor that McCarthy or Dr. Cohen are talking about does anyone mention the disparity in their age. Bobby and Alicia go out and present themselves as a couple, as a romantic couple, when she's like 14 years old and he's 23. That's not just incest, potentially. That is sexual abuse of a child, and nowhere is that really addressed. Bobby doesn't say no to Alicia when she offers herself to him because she's 14 or 16 or whatever it is. He does it only because it's his sister. And I think that there's something off about that. I'm not exactly sure what the incest theme of the novel was, other than perhaps some ideas about McCarthy not wanting his one heroine of a novel to ever have been sullied by the touch of another man, to put her in this impossible romantic sexual situation. I don't know, but it's just it's disturbing to me in ways that I don't even think McCarthy intended for it to be disturbing. So then the other question I have, the other thing I want to talk about, or one of the other things I want to talk about here at the very end, is whether or not all this science and math that McCarthy puts in the novel actually makes the novel better. In this case, no. I like fiction that incorporates science. I do. But this doesn't incorporate science. Having your characters recite scientific facts and theories, compare one theory to another or one mathematical idea to another, is not incorporating math or science into the plot of your novel. It's just having your characters know a whole lot of stuff because you know a whole lot of stuff and you want to put that whole lot of stuff on paper. So people know that you knew all that, because Alicia couldn't know it if you didn't know it. Do you see what I'm saying? There's nothing in there. You might argue that it's kind of character development. We already know Alicia's brilliant before we even pick up Stella Morris because we've read The Passenger. So he's not incorporating science into the novel. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, oh yes, well, this scientific theory is what, the theme of the novel, and the whole novel hangs together on that. I would just point out that McCarthy has Alicia even disprove that idea by essentially saying that people read into things and facts what they want to see. That people use science and math to come up with the idea, with things that support the ideas they already have. And I think readers of these books who, see some kind of mathematical or physics through line here that connects it all together and makes this really brilliant thing are guilty of doing that exact same thing, of reading that into the plot. If you wanted to read a book, which I think does a great job of incorporating science into the actual plot of the book, where it is a part of the book itself, then, Mark Nash's Three Dreams in the Key of G, which is essentially centers around the human genome, is equally brilliant in its wordplay. It's equally good in the writing to McCarthy, and yet it incorporates seamlessly this information about the genome that Mark shares with us, but it's not done as expository way. It's something we learn as we go along. It's a part of the characters. In one case, the genome is actually a character, and it is far better. It's a far better example of incorporating science as a theme than anything McCarthy does here in Stella Maris. So the last thing I want to talk about is the relationship between the pastor and Stella Maris. So here's the thing. This should have been one book. A publishing house that wasn't looking to cash in on what they believed to be probably is McCarthy's last work would have made this one book. They would have edited it down and they would have made it one book, because it does not need to be two. There's nothing that's in Stella Maris that couldn't have been worked into maybe another 50, 60 pages in The Passenger. It could have been done that way, and it's not, because what we're left here with Stella Maris is a book that makes no sense unless you've read The Passenger. Now, I know it's a companion piece, fine, but it doesn't have to be. You cannot read Stella Maris without knowing stuff about The Passenger. And if you can read Stella Maris, if you feel like, yes, you could pick up Stella Maris and read it without having read The Passenger, then that means The Passenger is unnecessary. So, to me, this should have been edited down into just one book, but for marketing and economic reasons, I assume it was sold as two books and as a pre-order box set. And that, to a certain extent, that's something that really, really bothers me. Anyway, there you go. I promise I will not make 2 more videos about Stella Maris. This will be my last words on the subject. Look forward to your comments. If you read the book or not, look forward to your comments in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.